Why don't we get started and take 3 minutes and introduce yourselves, and we can just go right down the line. Mark?
Hi, my name is Mark Conrad. I've been involved in school business administration for almost 20 years. Before that, I started out with a desire to work in human services for families and children, and for 6 years worked as a director of early childhood programs, including serving as a Head Start director with low-income children and families up in Cumberland County in Maine. I think that experience really crystallized for me the importance of education and the importance of making sure that no child fails, and decided I wanted to focus my career in education, and I did that more through the business and operations side by working now in 3 districts as a business administrator, first in a small rural district in Maine, then in Nashua here for over 10 years, from 1996 to 2006 as the business administrator. And I was fortunate enough to be here during many of the changes that came about in the district with the construction of these schools and the restructuring of grade levels and the establishment of integrated career and technology programs. So it was a very fulfilling professional experience for me here. And 3 years ago, moved over to Bedford as the chief financial officer. During that period of time, I've also been preparing for certification as a superintendent by pursuing an advanced graduate study in educational leadership. My initial college degrees were actually in business and social work as I was looking at a career in human services. And so I'm at a point now where I'm ready to step up to the next level as a superintendent. I've been a resident of Nashua for the last 13, 14 years. And I've been a parent of 2 sons coming through the Nashua School District for the last 13 years. At least I'll be a parent for about 3 more weeks. Then my youngest son will graduate from North School. So I think much of my thinking about the district and what I'd like to bring to the district is much informed by my role as a parent as it is by my educational background. When I saw the position here, I knew I wanted to return. I really felt being part of the community and having created many, I think, really enduring bonds with staff here, this was a place I wanted to come back to. And in thinking about why that was, I really think there's a resilience and a spirit of innovation with staff that's unusual for a district that looks like Nashua. And so I very much would look forward to that opportunity.
Good evening. My name is Bob Reedy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming out. I know your schedules are all probably very busy. On a personal note, I am married, have 2 children, 2 grown, I shouldn't call them children, 2 adult children. On a professional note, I have been a superintendent. I'm sure you've been online or read about us. I've been a superintendent. This is my 31st year. I will be retiring from New York State this year. However, I want to continue my work as a superintendent because it's work that I love. One of the things that's on my resume that you may not be familiar with is because I don't believe New Hampshire has organizations like BOCES, as a Board of Cooperative Educational Services. For 7 years, I worked for the State Department of Education in New York, where I ran a BOCES responsible for 3 counties, a 20,000 pupil region, which was pretty much considered Appalachia in the Elmira Corning area, if you're familiar with New York at all. Our primary charge from the commissioner during that time was to raise standards for all children, and we were very successful in doing that. In terms of leadership philosophy, I believe that all children can learn at high levels. I believe that is our ultimate responsibility and challenge that we face. I believe the way you do that is through working together, both within the school district and within the community and with parents. Within the school district, you have to have a high level of commitment, a high level of belief in our children, and also a high level of competence. So it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to answering your questions, and again, thank you for coming.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. We have all had a wonderful day. the hospitality that we've had throughout the district and meeting folks from all walks of life has been just wonderful. So it was just a great day. We all may be a little worn for the task, but certainly well worth our time and effort. And again, thanks for the hospitality. Give you a little bit of information about myself. I've been in education 38 years. I spent 13 years as a classroom teacher at the elementary school level. I moved into an administrative position. 10 years I spent as an elementary principal and a middle school principal. After completing that, I had an opportunity to participate in an administrative team at the central office level. I did work around curriculum development and instruction, professional development with teachers, working with the resource part of the job in hiring and mentoring teachers in the district. After completing that time as a curriculum director, I was also the assistant superintendent, which obviously gave me other opportunities and other tasks that are required at central office, facilities development and negotiations and budgeting. So I've really had a chance during my career to have experiences in a lot of different phases of the work that we do every day. I left the district and came to Nashua and spent a year here as the instructional supervisor. I had the chance to visit all of the buildings, spend time with teachers, work with teachers, provide observations, feedback on teachers as they were in their first, second, and third year. Worked with the district in mentoring some administrative staff, the assistant principals, also did some work with professional development to ensure that the teachers in Nashua were highly trained. At the end of that year, I had been offered a position as a superintendent of schools. I went to Newmarket, New Hampshire, as the superintendent there. I've spent 5 years. After completing just about 5 years, I received a visit from the Commissioner of Education, Lionel Tracy, who asked me to join his administrative team at the Department of Education. And there was an incredible learning curve as I learned all of the ins and outs of state government and the Department of Ed. My current position is Director of Instructional Services, and I oversee the department, the Bureau of Special Education, the Bureau of Accountability and Assessment, which is all the test and measurement and the curriculum instruction, and also the Bureau of Integrated Programs, and that's the bureau that oversees approximately $200+ million worth of federal revenues that come into the state that are earmarked for services to our cities and towns. In addition to that, I do work in technology and human and the health services. I just got assigned that my 3 minutes is up, but again, it's a great privilege to be here tonight. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Brian Cochran, Director of Accountability and Assessment here in Nashua. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to the conversation this evening. I come to Nashua, New Hampshire, by way of 22 years in the public school system in Nova Scotia, completion of a doctorate, and then 3 years in Kansas City, and then back here in New Hampshire. I've been a middle school teacher, a high school teacher. I've worked in small rural junior, senior highs. I worked in K-9 elementary middle schools. I worked in urban schools. I've had some time in Nova Scotia, both as science curriculum consultant, and then moved onward within the Department of Education to a program director, and then back to my school district. And much of the last 15 years of my life has been devoted to large-scale educational change. There are only about 7 school districts in Nova Scotia, and yet the student population in Nova Scotia is about the same as New Hampshire, which has 70-some school districts. So the smallest district in Nova Scotia is about 8,000. The districts that I worked with when I was at the Department of Education ranged from 8,000, 12,000, 25,000. And the largest district in the province, and the district that I worked in as a teacher and went back to as a curriculum facilitator is Halifax Regional School District. A total population of about 300,000. The student population was about 53,000. It was a very culturally diverse community, and it was a pleasure to teach there. It was a fabulous organization. I have, as I say, a broad range of experiences from working with publishers to writing curriculum. I've worked with departments of education in 4 Canadian provinces, 3 states, because I've worked with NECAP, worked with New Hampshire Department of Ed as well as Vermont and Rhode Island, as well as my time in Kansas City. I worked with schools in both Missouri and Kansas. So my understanding of teaching and learning and school improvement, I think, is one of the great strengths that I bring with me. And my time in the district, I think, has allowed me to bring both an outsider's perspective and the ability to ask good questions, coupled with now, at this point in time, really knowing, I think, where the board is and how the district has to move forward. And I'm hoping to be able to lead those initiatives.
Great. Excuse me. My name, by the way, is Tom Vaughn. I'm the board president. We also have board members strategically located throughout the room. So we've got index cards and pencils, and if you've got a question, I've already written it out. If a board member could collect it, then we can get going. I do have a question here I could start, but it seems like we've got a lot of questions from the audience, so I'd rather use those questions. We'll write yours out. Okay, good. Just give me one.
Just make that a quick one.
So here's the first question, and ask to try and give each a chance to answer it and try and take 2 minutes, keep your answer to 2 minutes. What's the first thing you want to change in our school system, and why? Why don't we start at the other end, Brian?
Having been here a couple of years, in terms of change, first of all, Nashua School District is doing a lot of things right. We have 5 Title I elementaries and 3 middle schools, all of whom are eligible to be Title I schools. And of those, 2 elementaries made AYP this year in both reading and math. And in fact, one of them, Amherst Street, has made reading and math for 3 years in a row now. And Pennachuck Middle School made it for both reading and math. So clearly we're doing some things right. But in terms of what would I change, I would change, in essence, working with the board, the first change I would look at would be the administrative structure of central office. I think there are some changes that we need to do to increase our ability to manage people and projects, to improve communication, to improve collaboration. Realistically, the people in this district work very, very hard. If it was only about working harder, then we would be where we'd like to be already. That's not the case. And we've made huge strides in reading. We're lagging and not where we need to be in math. And it's going to be a major initiative that has to be taken on in the next little while. The strategic plan and some of the things that have been done in the last couple of years have laid in place a tremendous framework. But I think we have to get the organizational structure, the accountability, the authority, the level of coordination that we need to move forward with the strategic plan and other related initiatives.
A number of artifacts, if you will, documents in this district that have that folks have developed over time. The strategic plan is a good example. You have professional development plan. You have the teacher performance plan surveys. I think all of those documents and artifacts need a review by an incoming superintendent before a superintendent comes in and just begins to go about the change process. I think that it's critically important that the superintendent have time to develop relationships, get into the community, meet with people, and get a deeper understanding of the needs of the district, again, before coming in and just going forward with change. With that said, there are a number of issues, though, that statewide and locally that we all need to look at very seriously, and that's around students and what do our students need, and what are the kinds of things that we want to bring forward to assist students. So in terms of change, I'm looking at the opportunities that we can provide for students around issues like high school reform, and how do we address the diversity of this community in terms of ensuring that all children reach their potential. And those changes that I would want to bring about would be a result of the investigation of that. And what do we need in high school? How can we increase student learning there? And how can we be sure that all of our youngsters are engaged in learning?
Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure what to change. I have to learn about that, but the thing that I would do is the first three, I think you said the first 3 months, was that the question?
Just the first things you want to change in the
First
school
things,
system.
well, the first thing I want to do is I want to come into the district, I want to meet people, I want to listen, and I want to learn. And in order to do that, I've developed a plan of entry, which would have me meeting with board members, administrators, community groups, city personnel, so that I could learn as much as I could about the district and do a lot of listening. From the data I have reviewed about the district, certainly immediate action and immediate attention will be required, as Kathy stated, around student achievement and focusing on students. That's certainly a challenge given the diversity of our school district. I believe strongly, as I said earlier, that all children can learn at high levels. So a part of my work would be learning about our curriculum, our instructional process, the support services that we provide to children, and looking very carefully at the data. So my beginnings would be one of learning and one of listening, and then using the data for decision-making purposes and determining a direction that we should take.
Like the others, I agree with the idea that you have to come in and ask questions and listen and get a better sense of the district before you can start thinking about the changes that make sense. Beyond that, I think a lot of work has been put into place in the recent past, in the last couple of years, in beginning some initiatives that are beginning to bear fruit in terms of student achievement. Initiatives like response to intervention and some of the new resources they put in at the secondary level to give students alternative pathways for staying in school. You also have a new strategic process that there's been a great deal of both input on from both the community at large and the school community. I think we really need to honor that work that's been done as an incoming superintendent and think about the importance of some stability and continuity in the process in putting into place or beginning to work with the board and the staff in moving forward with those initiatives and the strategic plan. Having said that, one area I would take a very close look at is developing a collaborative culture within the district, because it's very clear that for high student achievement to occur consistently across the district like this, you need opportunities for teachers to be meeting together on a regular basis by grade level or by subject area and begin to develop a core of common assessments so that the learning experience for a student at Ledge Street is the same experience and you have the same expectations for a student at Bicentennial. So I would be looking very closely at a collaborative culture that would enable teachers to meet on a regular basis to look at the alignment of curriculum, the common assessments we have in place, and how they can use the data for that on a timely basis to inform teaching within the classroom for individual students. That would be it.
Thank you. This is kind of a long question, but it's a good one. How will you analyze and address the effectiveness / inefficiencies of block scheduling and the impact it has on student learning, options available to students, test scores, and post-secondary preparation? And why don't we start with you, Bob, and go down the line? You won that one, huh?
That's a long one. You have to help. I have experience with block scheduling. When I had the privilege of being superintendent in Horseheads, New York, we implemented a block schedule in a 1,600 pupil high school. Thank you. Before we implemented the schedule, we developed a set of criteria and objectives that we wanted to meet and how we were going to measure them. Those objectives included higher passing rates, fewer discipline referrals, etc. And we outlined all of those. So in my previous experience, we went back and assessed how effective we were by going back and looking to see if we achieved our objectives. In terms of inefficiencies of block scheduling, I'm not sure what that means, But I know when you go into the block, you have to be very sure that you invest a great deal up front in training people, because you can't lecture for 80 minutes or 70 minutes or whatever it may be. You have to have a very constructivist classroom when you're in the block. Kids have to be very actively engaged in their learning, and you have to have multiple activities take place in that environment. So I guess I would look at to ensure that the block was being used properly, that we weren't just talking at kids for 80 minutes instead of talking at them for 40 minutes. And I guess I would look at some data. What were the results pre-block, post-block? Get some feedback from our customers, which would be the teachers and the kids, and then make adjustments accordingly if they were required.
Thanks. You want to pass the question on?
Thank you. I think it's critically important that whether it's block scheduling or any program that is implemented into a school district has a process for evaluation. So program evaluation is very important. And what do you mean by program evaluation? Obviously, you have to look at the multiple components, the costs of implementing new programs, the impact that it will have on teacher preparation and professional development. You have to examine the results. What are the outcomes by implementing a program, block scheduling in this case? What will be the outcomes of that? How will that directly affect student performance? And again, you have to use data. Some of that data will come from the users, the students, the families, the parents. Obviously, the most important piece were the teachers and how they implemented that. But using the data, you can then use that data to evaluate the effectiveness of that program on student learning. I guess oh, here we go. It's difficult to look at post-secondary because you have one system. You don't have a variable. You don't have a different program to see, well, if the kids that are in a regular schedule, how do they perform and what is their rate in terms of post-secondary versus youngsters that might be in the block schedule. So that does present a problem in terms of gathering data. You need to look at both of those pieces. But by looking at the results of student learning over time and student success over time, you should be able to adequately evaluate the effectiveness, in this case, in the question around block scheduling. Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. There are some real advantages to block scheduling. It allows students across 4 years to experience 32 different courses. And there are some efficiencies, as Bob has pointed out. You need to be prepared to make the transition, and you need to know what it is you're trying to get out of block scheduling. There are also some inefficiencies of block scheduling, and those intersect with any given school in a particular way. Nashua is somewhat unique in the amount of leveling in core courses, and when you intersect leveling of courses with a comprehensive high school and block scheduling, you run into some issues you have to address, and we actually have addressed several of those in the last year. Last spring I was asked to oversee the scheduling at both North and South, and there were some inefficiencies there, especially with respect to quarter courses, low enrollments, and the problems it created with the number of quarter courses that we had that led to a lot of inefficiencies. And so we've streamlined that schedule this year, working with the teachers and administration of both North and South. We've hardwired more courses in, and we paired quarter courses into mandated pairs. And given that we just hit the button on a build at North today, and it was a successful build and the building of the teacher schedule, we're very pleased with those results. Some of the other inefficiencies and issues have to do with courses that may be better served across the entire year. One of the things that we've done, for example, is go to A/B day schedules for music. It still doesn't address the issue of how do you manage language courses where you could have, French 1 the first semester of 1 year and French 2 not until the second semester of the next year. It becomes an issue. One of the other things that really hamstrings us is the fact that we're a district CTE center. In fact, we're the largest district CTE center in the state. It brings many wonderful things with it, but because we're a regional center, we accept students from another 4 or 5 schools. So that means that we can't do some relatively innovative things with our schedule. For example, create skinnies. A skinny is when you take a block class and split it in 2. We have a fair number of students who struggle, and they may be better off in something other than a 90-minute block. So my time's up, sorry.
I think there are actually many different variables to block scheduling. In Nashua, you have 32 credits, so you essentially have 4 classes you're taking, no study halls. You complete a class within a semester. In Bedford, where I am now, where they've opened a new high school in the last 2 years, they've gone to a block schedule, but it's a different kind of schedule. They have alternative days. You take 4 or 5 subjects throughout the year, and you work through 2 semesters to complete the course, but you take them in blocks on alternating days. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both approaches. The other difference with Bedford is you have study halls or open periods for students, and I think that actually may have some advantages in some circumstances. For example, they've established academic centers there for students, so if you're struggling in a class, you can be advised to attend the academic center and receive some tutoring from teachers in coordination with your core classroom teacher, so you can receive some remedial assistance in addressing the needs you have in that core class. That's more difficult to do during the school day when you're in classes throughout the day and you don't have other options for study halls or other periods. But I think getting back to Kathy's point, it's almost the wrong question to ask. I think that the correct question is, what are our benchmarks for improving student academic achievement? What are the other evidence that we have of that? For example, the My Voice survey, which might tell you how engaged students are. And then evaluate what your impediments are to progress in those areas, and it may naturally take you back to the structure of our block scheduling, but it may take you back to other factors.
Great, thank you. These are terrific questions, I've got to say. And here's another one. In today's Telegraph, Brian Cochran, Mark Conrad, and Robert Reedy have advocated no longer having leveled classes in middle school. Other than the honors option suggested by Mr. Conrad, could they please outline how they see a 7th grade teacher serving both students with rudimentary reading and writing skills who will need remedial instruction, multi-sensory instruction, and frequent repetition, and the advanced students who need to be challenged to continue performing at a proficient level? Should I read that again, or just... So, in today's Telegraph, Brian Cochran, Mark Conrad, and Robert Reedy have advocated no longer having leveled classes in middle school. And so the questioner then goes on to say, other than the honors option suggested by Mr. Conrad, could they please outline how they see a 7th grade teacher serving both students with rudimentary reading and writing skills who may need remedial instruction, multi-sensory instruction, and/or frequent repetition, and the advanced students who need to be challenged continuing to perform at a proficient level? And why don't we all take a shot at that and start with Kathy?
Thank you. That question was posed to all of us regarding tracking, ability grouping. Everyone has a different term for it, but we were all asked that question. My position on that is that it's important that we personalize education. We no longer, it's an effective delivery of instruction to expect that one size fits all is not going to garner the outcomes that we have for youngsters in terms of excellence in school. So I have advocated for personalization, individualized instruction, and personalized learning plans for youngsters so that we can differentiate their instruction in different ways. And so what does that mean for a classroom teacher? I mean, the challenges are incredible. There's a diversity in every classroom across this city in terms of student learning. And so it's critical that we provide them with skills. So professional development is very important. In addition to that, we need to develop strategies to affect learning with kids. Not all kids will learn in the same way. If we're in high school, we may need to do apprenticeships extended learning opportunities, using the core competencies that have been developed by our school system. We should be able to use those to provide a different way of student learning. We haven't accessed technology in a way that we could affect the learning of students. The stand and deliver isn't effective for a lot of kids. We need to look at other modalities for instruction in order to meet the needs of the very diverse learners that we have in our classrooms.
Actually, I don't believe that I advocated the elimination of leveling at the middle school. I do want to praise the board for the work that they've done this year in having the open hearings on leveling, and I think that the action that they took was to study, go back and look at the data, and talk with teachers and schools and central office before they do anything was a very good plan. What I said was that philosophically I believe that in essence support what the research shows, that on aggregate, when you do not level students, you actually maximize the learning of the group. However, I also said that I'm a very pragmatic individual. I don't think that the Nashua middle schools are ready to be unleveled. And at this point in time, we're struggling to meet the needs of our lowest achieving students. My comment was that we have to look very fiercely at the data and very directly at the data and say we need to serve our most struggling students, those who are reluctant learners who have not been successful at school, and try and close the achievement gap during middle school. And whatever we have to do that is what we have to look at. And so rather than being philosophical and say, philosophically, I agree this way, and therefore that's what we should do it, pragmatically, if and when we're ready to move away from leveling at middle school, then I think it has to be when teachers at the middle school level are convinced that they can do it. And in terms of what can you do to teach that, that's fairly well documented. The problem becomes, can middle school teachers or any teachers consistently deliver on the level of differentiated instruction that closes that achievement gap and adequately serves the needs of all students. So I think the board at this point in time is wise to take a break, take a step back, and look at the situation, have some conversations as we move forward and we move our middle schools more into a true middle school concept with some flexible grouping, with some differentiation of instruction. I don't believe our staff are ready to move to a non-leveled system. I don't know if during my tenure, when I was asked earlier what length of time I would be interested in serving as superintendent, it was 15 years. If and when we're ready to make that change, it'll have to be led by the middle school teachers.
I think I'm going to say very much what Brian has said in a different way. And this is what I said when the board asked the question the other night of me. For middle school students, they become very self-conscious very quickly of how others perceive them. And when they know there are 3 levels of learning and they're in the bottom level, it doesn't take them long to see themselves as someone who can do no better than the bottom level of learning. So I think it is important to look at that issue and move towards an undifferentiated or move away from ability grouping at the middle school level. However, I agree with Brian that you have to take that over time. It's not an all or nothing proposition. For example, there's greater consensus of the desire to ability group in math than there would be in English and social studies. So you could look at perhaps starting out with a pilot project that would remove ability grouping in a particular team at the middle level in social studies and in English. I also think the reality is a good teacher can differentiate classroom instruction sufficiently to meet the needs of students in the classroom, including being able to challenge the students at the top. And there are different approaches you can take. It doesn't mean you're personalizing instruction to 25 different kids, but you can deliver instruction to 3 or 4 different levels simultaneously in the way you group kids and the way you move kids through groups. And it is a challenge, and I suspect it would require some real professional development and dialogues with our teaching staff, but there are ways you can do that, so I think it's worth looking at.
Philosophically, I'm opposed to selecting and sorting kids. The research is very clear that when we have heterogeneous learning communities, everyone benefits from that. How do you do it? Well, you don't just jump in and do it day one. It takes a lot of preparation. The way you do it is you differentiate instruction. What are some of the instructional strategies that can be used to do that? Cooperative learning, mastery learning, direct instruction, curriculum-based assessment. You also provide support in addition to the classroom teacher for those kids who are struggling, because there are kids who are struggling. We do that in the form of instructional support and our RTI model, which has been very effective for early intervention. So I'm not proposing we jump in with 2 feet immediately, but we have to move toward that, because when we select and sort kids, we develop inequities. We send a clear message to kids, a self-fulfilling prophecy, that you're in the low tier, and that's where you belong, and that's what we think of you. And we know that every child has gifts and talents. Every child has the right to have those gifts and talents developed, and we as educators should be teaching children and not judging them.
Okay, I'm going to step in here because almost all the questions are very lengthy, so I'm trying to give a break to Mr. Vaughn here. So I think this is one that you can answer pretty quick. So if we can do this quicker, and I mean like 30 seconds, that'd be great, because we have a lot of questions. So for the 3 candidates who have a history with the city, please comment on the desirability of Nashua given the problems with contract issues. And for Mr. Reedy, are you aware of past contract issues? If you are aware, obviously this doesn't scare you. And will you live in Nashua? So, I don't know where we left off. Let's start with Ron.
Yes, I will. Yes, I will live in Nashua. I'm already here. I think it's a great district to work in, having been here for 10 years and wanting to come back. And I know there are a lot of staff who feel that way too. I think the fact we're a diverse community adds to the strength of what we have to offer for the right person, and I think it really gives us an opportunity to make a difference for kids that I find compelling as a reason to be here. I do think we need to anticipate over the next 5 years that we're going to see an exodus of teachers across all districts just due to demographics, and we need to begin thinking about how we're going to be able to market ourselves and provide incentives for attracting great teachers to the district as our teachers naturally age out of the system. Certainly maintaining positive labor relations is part of that process, and I think that has to be a focus for anyone who comes in as a new superintendent.
Yes, my wife and I will move to the city of Nashua. We've discussed that, and we welcome that opportunity. It's a great city. We have some familiarity with it because I lived in New Hampshire from 1980 to 1987, where I had the privilege of being superintendent in the Peterborough-Jaffrey Ringe area. In terms of why the city? I think it's a great city. It's a diverse city. There's just a lot going on culturally. It's a place we like very much. So I hope that answers that question. Am I aware of contract history? I'm aware of what I've read, what I've heard. I understand there has been some controversy as it relates to contracts. No, it doesn't scare me. I've been dealing with contracts for probably 33 years. And the nature of labor relations and negotiations is sometimes difficult, but obviously necessary. Did I answer all that? Let me see the rest of that just for a minute there. Did I do pretty well?
Yep.
Boy, I did pretty well. No. Thank you.
I am aware of the contract negotiations and the process and the time that is spent developing relationships and towards the end result of a contract. And I think that from my perspective, it will be critically important that early on dialogue and discussions begin with the various groups, the various associations and unions in the city to begin to develop relationships, to talk about issues, and to put topics on the table long before you go to the table to do formal negotiations. I think it's not effective to wait until the 3rd year of a 4th year or whatever year of a contract to then sit down and to begin to talk with folks about the needs and wants of the associations or the unions. So I think that's how I would address it. I've done negotiations before. I did it as a superintendent. I've sat on both sides of the table throughout my career with negotiations from a teacher perspective as well as from an administrative perspective. My husband and I just built a home in Chester, New Hampshire. We just moved about 6 months ago, so I will maintain my home in Chester.
I'm not sure on the question whether the desirability means as a destination and as a community, or desirability as a place of employment, as a place to be superintendent. I think the answer to both of those is Nashua is absolutely desirable. There are only a few locations in the state that afford the breadth of culture, the breadth and the challenge that Nashua offers. Nashua and working in the Nashua School District and running this Nashua School District, in case you haven't noticed, not an easy job. You have to want to be here. You have to enjoy the fact that Nashua people are passionate about their politics, passionate about their school, and they have high expectations of accountability of folks. So from that perspective, that doesn't scare me, and I am aware of the contract history. One of the things that I have seen recently that really encourages me is the way that the mayor, the Board of Aldermen, and the Board of Education have worked together to compress the negotiations in the last contract, which is really what saved the day. But it hasn't been a one-time incident. If you've noticed of late, there's been far more collaboration and discussions, and I think we've seen tremendous work in that regard. So rather than having the board approve a contract that may or may not be approved by the Board of Aldermen, that may or may not be approved by the mayor, and then may or may not be overridden, we're talking about a dialogue across city governance that I think will benefit everybody. And as long as that is maintained, I think that piece is looked after. With respect to living in Nashua, I think all four of us recognize that the next superintendent of Nashua, their heart and soul has to be here, and they have to know that their days are long, their days are in this community, and their primary obligation is to the students and the teachers and the organization of the district, but also to the community. I don't think it's especially important whether or not they live inside or outside the Nashua boundary, as long as you realize your first commitment is to this community. I've not discussed it, and whether or not with my family it's another, whether or not we move. Frankly, I don't think it's especially high. You want the best person you can get, whether they want to live 3 miles away or on the other side of the border. It is something I certainly would be willing to consider, but personally, I don't think it's a significant criteria.
I don't think Mr. Haas heard my 30 seconds, so that was an interesting interpretation of 30 seconds. So we can try that again. So actually, I do, this question's about the Teacher of the Year. We actually had a discussion of this on the bus tour out here. So the Lions Club gives out an award for Teacher of the Year, which I think you all heard about. That's going to be done Monday night. But in order to continue that mission and give back to the community, the Nashua Lions Club needs active members. Therefore, what can you do to encourage employees, administrators, teachers, and others to become active members of the Lions Clubs or other service groups within the city? And we'll start with Mr. Reedy.
Well, certainly one of our responsibilities is to contribute back to the community. I've been a Rotary member since 1980, past Rotary president, member of the Chamber of Commerce, member of the Chamber of Commerce board. So I think what you do is you try to encourage people to lead by example, to get involved, to become part of the community. And I think, again, you do it by leading by example. Very important to be out there in the community and to work together with the community.
I agree with that. I think involvement in community activities is very important. I think the superintendent is a role model. I have been a member of Rotary Club. I serve on an area agency board of directors. I've been engaged in an institutional review committee at the Parkland Medical Center. I've been on soup kitchens, and I think it's important. And I think when we talk about collaboration, it isn't just the businesses or the community people coming into our doors, but it requires that we leave our house, if you will, our schools, and work out in the community and participate. I think it's a two-way street, and it's very important that we demonstrate that kind of commitment to the community, to the area agencies, and the various groups that service our families and children. And I think it's important to see that we both are committed to that. And involvement is crucial, and I would hope that that by having more people involved, young people, having Lions clubs and Rotary clubs have activities in the high school with the young people can actually serve as a motivator for the young folks to join. So it's a very important element.
I speak having spent at least 3 decades of my life in coaching and working with sport governing bodies at a very large level and spending a lot of volunteer time. And from my perspective, the question really speaks to 2 things: service to the community and a sense of community. I don't think the board or a superintendent or anyone else should try and determine how one serves your community or how one develops a sense of community. But I think that you have to understand that the relationship between a school and its community is vital. And all 4 of us have spoken to this all day today. I think that clearly we want engagement in our schools. We want strong PTOs. We want people involved in amateur athletics, as coaching and managers. As parents, society is becoming increasingly fragmented, and the demands of our time are increasing. And there's a much broader way now that you can serve your community and do it well. At the same point in time, we have more and more dual-income families and less time to do so. So I think it's more about service to community and sense of community than it is any one organization.
I think the superintendent should lead by example, but the way I got my start in working in communities was in high school, in the ecology club. And I think our focus should be on working with students to help them learn the value of service to the community. I think there are many different ways you can do that. In Bedford, they actually have a service learning requirement as part of the graduation requirement. Now, I'm not suggesting that would be a policy here, but I think there are ways you can encourage students to get involved in service to the community through their clubs and their courses. I know my son was enrolled in a course 2 years ago at Nashua North where he had to pursue a project in the community, and he chose to work at the Nashua Soup Kitchen, and for 5 weeks he got up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning to help them serve breakfast. It was the only time he got up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So I think there are ways we should be focusing on encourage students to do that as a lifelong pursuit.
I guess if you guys are still comfortable with that, seems to be working out okay. We have a lot of questions. I'd just like to try to get through as many questions as we could. So unless we run into trouble here, let's try to stick with that timing. So this next question refers to that program-based budgeting process that we've talked about a few times today. So as the next educational leader in Nashua, how do you feel about relinquishing setting the priorities in the budget to an appointed group of community members who have little knowledge or responsibility of the inner workings of the school district? Let's go with Kathy.
Thank you. I guess I was a little surprised by the fact that the community have little knowledge. I think that the folks that serve on these committees are demonstrating a commitment to the school district. And if they have information that they lack, then it's inherent upon the school district to ensure that they have the information so that they can help set the stage for the appropriate allocations in the budget for particular programs. I think that leadership is about collaboration. I think leadership is about listening to the community. I think leadership is empowering the community and the stakeholders to an active role. We've all expressed concern about folks not being involved. Well, they'll be involved when we empower them and we give them the opportunities to participate and express themselves as to the direction that they would like to see the district take. So I'm going to pass.
Okay. I think it's a valid point. I think it's a concern from the extent that we're asking a great deal of roughly 15 to 20 people who put in a tremendous amount of time and effort and angst in a short period to try and understand something as complex as priorities of a school district. But I don't think the board or the superintendent, in my experience, have abdicated the responsibility and turned that over to that group. I think they take the advice of the group and often agree with them. We have seen some things go above the line and be established as absolute priorities. And so we go from that group's budget to the superintendent's budget to the board's budget. And there have been changes, and while those changes may seem subtle, I think they indicate that both the superintendent and the board have exercised their due diligence in the process. But I think it does bring the community to the table in a way that few other processes do. I think there are some issues with respect to the process, and I've spoken to this earlier in the day. We have 13, 14 budget proposals that have to go in front of these people. We segment the budget process into these 13 silos or 14 silos, and then we ask principals like David Ryan and Jen Susing to present. They end up having to deal with the budgets that are passed for their instructional budget, for the special ed budget, for the administrative budget, for the student services budget. And one of the issues becomes that's too many packages. They know what their priorities are for the things that they control, but somebody else's line item budget really affects them, and they don't have a say on it. So we have to do something. Actually, it was recommended at the strategic planning discussions at the board meeting on Monday night by one of the aldermen, and that is we have to think about recasting this from 13 silos to a smaller number of more comprehensive budgets, a high school budget perhaps, a middle school budget, and also an elementary budget, and one or two more. That way you can look at the entire package. I think it's incumbent upon us to make the case for the priorities of the district and do it well. And I think this process allows for that.
I find it hard to give a short answer on budgeting, but I'll try. I think the irony of this question on having community members making recommendations on the budget is the fact that ultimately the line item budget is the responsibility of the Board of Education to approve, which is a board of community members elected by community members. And so I think it speaks to the point that public schools are community institutions, and the important decisions, the most important decisions that get made from a policy or budget perspective is made by citizens from the community. And that's, I think, a system we all cherish and see as the bedrock of our democracy. So I don't think it's a far leap to talk about community members being engaged in the programming budget process. I also think it's there's a lot of value to the budget process they're using. It's very transparent. I think there are ways we can maybe streamline and simplify the process and have it less fragmented than it is, but I think the last 3 years have shown it to be a very valuable approach.
From what I understand of the budget process, I certainly wholeheartedly support community involvement, community advisory. I don't support relinquishing and setting priorities by individual groups. I think that the ultimate budget has to have a view from 35,000 feet. I think there has to be one group, and that's the Board of Education, who looks at the complete picture. And I think when you're analyzing budget decisions, you have to understand how different decisions affect others. One of the things that we do is we look very carefully at those decisions, and we intentionally ask, what are the obvious consequences of this decision, and what are the unintended consequences of this decision? And I think that has to be done by the superintendent and the Board of Education with the administrative team, because when you take away from here, it may have a domino effect over there, and 13 individual groups working on the budget won't make that connection, and that might not be a good thing for the kids.
Okay, we have a wealth of good questions here. We've also gone about an hour. At least one more question. Are people feeling like they would like to hear more questions or mixing? I'm seeing a nod for more questions. All right, so this is Nashua schools and classrooms are very diverse ethnically and socially. With this said, the positions that students see as people who are educated, as I think the educators, are not so diverse. How will you recruit a more diverse staff or faculty, not just ethnically, but socially? And I believe Brian is holding up his hand, so take that one.
This is a conversation that I was engaged in about 15 years ago in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. Cole Harbour has a very significant minority population, in this case African Canadian, about 15% of the population, although some of the schools that I taught in, I was fortunate to have up to 50% children of color in my classes, and it was a fabulous experience, and it allowed me to develop a greater skill and acumen at reaching students and drawing them in and engaging them in my class, because the reality is a lot of teachers come from white middle class or upper middle class backgrounds and expect that everybody comes from that same set of expectations. And when they fail to connect and reach students, we sometimes blame the student instead of blaming the assumptions that we take about the values and the knowledge and the culture that they bring to school. And on our part, we have to do better. We actually recruit quite extensively throughout the New England area, and not only for teaching positions, but also for central office positions. The board that I worked at in Nova Scotia actually had the diversity within the community that we were able to attract a fair number of high-quality candidates that represented the diversity that we had in the community. We'll continue to try to do that. I think what we have to understand is two things. Quality teachers teach all children well, but a Caucasian, for example, teacher can't be a role model to a Hispanic student in that sense. So there is a piece there. So that does make a difference, and it makes a difference in the following way. As mentioned earlier by Dr. Reedy, education is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If students don't see themselves reflected in the curriculum or seen in the class, they're less likely to buy in and value education. By definition, by not buying into education and not seeing as it important, that becomes true. Their prophecy becomes true. And that self-fulfilling prophecy, whether it be through leveling or who we have teaching in our classes or who we see reflected in our curriculum, is important. We can't be colorblind.
I think I talked earlier about the fact I was concerned that in the next 5 years or so, you're going to see a demographic with teachers leaving the system just by age that will require us to really ratchet up our recruitment efforts to attract the best staff. And so I think it gets down to identifying different markets that are going to enable you to recruit more teachers who reflect the ethnic and socioeconomic background of our students. I also think we need to think about our own students who maybe go on to become teachers and try to attract them back to the district that they grew up in. There are a number of programs that have had great success nationally, Teach for America, for example, that have focused on targeting teachers into urban inner city areas, and they looked at groups like Peace Corps volunteers and paraprofessionals. So I think you have to become inventive in thinking about how you can reach out to different groups to encourage them and train them to become teachers. And so I think that's a long-term strategy that's certainly necessary and valid.
I would agree with Mark. I think you have to be creative in your recruiting. I think you have to go to colleges and universities that train a cadre of people coming into the profession that represent the diversity of our community. I think you have to recruit in population centers that reflect our diversity. And I think one of the selling points that we have here is our location and the quality of life that can be enjoyed here. You can enjoy the diversity and everything that brings, and also enjoy a very high quality of life. So I think part of it is where you recruit, and part of it is how you sell Nashua as a community to people and make it inviting for them to be here.
Thanks. I would reiterate all the salient points that have just been made, but I'd ask two things to reflect on. We have a diverse population here. It represents multi-ethnic groups and a variety of social economic groups. And within our schools, we should be fostering opportunities for kids to engage in education. and creating future teacher groups, just like we have future business leaders in our CTE. I think that we have to do that within the ranks of our high schools. And quite honestly, even lower than that. I think the middle school kids are ready for that as they begin to explore careers. And exploration of career options should be an integral part of their studies during middle school and high school. And here we have the best and the brightest in our teachers here that can encourage youngsters to go into education. And sadly, over the past few years, it's been somewhat discouraged that students not go into education for a variety of reasons. And I think that we need to stop that. I think we need to talk about what a great profession it is, what the wonderful rewards we have. The second is I would recommend that we do a very active marketing plan to encourage people to come to Nashua. When you drive into Nashua, you've been selected as the City of the Year for several times over the last 10 years. You have a reputation of excellence, and you have to play that hand. You have to play the hand that people want to come here, live here, raise families, have children, raise families, and participate in the community. So I think two things. One, we have to encourage our young people, and two, we have to develop a plan to market this community.
Thank you. What would you do differently to educate the community about special needs children? And as school superintendent, do you think you have responsibility to integrate the special needs children into the community? And if so, how would you involve the school in providing direct learning opportunities to special needs children beyond school boundaries and to integrate them with the community? Shall I read that again? I think Mark is up, so how are you doing, Mark, on that? You're all set?
Yeah. I think I'll answer that in two parts. The second part had to do with integrating special needs students into the community beyond school boundaries. And I believe we already have some efforts within the district to provide supported transitions to the work world, supported job placements, and I think we need to continue to look strongly at those efforts so we can provide structured placements for students with disabilities and help them gain independent skills through community placements. I think that actually that concept can apply to all of our students in helping them transition from the world of school to the world of work. But I think it's more certainly critical for those students who need special assistance for independent living skills or assistance in how to be successful in the work world given their disabilities. As far as educating the community about special needs children, I think we have a responsibility to educate the community about the needs of all of our students, including the needs of special needs children. But all of our students have different needs, and I think we need to look at, through the budget process and through other venues, through speeches to the Rotary Club or the Lions Club, continuously talking about the needs of our students and how we're working to address them within the district and what our needs are in doing that.
Do I think we should have a role in integrating students into the community? Yes, I do. I feel very strongly about that. I feel very strongly that it really starts in our schools, because in our schools we want to have discussions with our students and our faculty about diversity, about tolerance, about acceptance. So I think that's where it starts. In terms of integrating students into the community, I mentioned earlier that I was a superintendent of a board of cooperative education. Introduce them into the community. I think it's very important. And yes, the school has to be a partner in doing all of that. But again, I think understanding differences and respecting diversity starts within the school district and within the walls of the school.
Thank you. The mission of the Nashua School District is not to educate only certain parts of the population. I think that the mission is very clear, that you're going to educate, we all are going to educate all children. And that has been the mission of the school district and continues to be. And we do have an obligation to meet the needs of all of our youngsters. Clearly, our society will be judged by how we serve all groups in our schools. That we won't be judged on just one or two individual groups, but all of our students. And we have an obligation to ensure that transitions from our schools into the community are made. And we do that in ways that Bob just mentioned, by working with our local area agencies and helping to provide the resources for students. I also think that, again, I kind of go back to this issue about making sure that there's good information out there, and we have to use the tools that we have in the district to help inform people about what educating children is about. And there's just a plethora of good information out there around special education and disabilities, and what the kinds of services that can be provided and the kinds of needs that folks who are disabled have in our schools as well as in our community. And I think it's all part of learning. It is what we perform every day, and we teach people from zero until they pass from this world. So I think the obligation of the school system to be a part of that is tantamount to the mission statement that hangs in the hallways and in the offices throughout this district.
I think there are two aspects of this. One is the role that schools have in educating students as citizens who will value all people. And I think the importance of that role cannot be understated. I also think that the school and school district have an obligation to help folks with that transition. We do have the stimulus funds that we receive for IDEA, some of which are in the pipe now and some of which will be coming this fall. Some of it has been targeted for programs that do just that. The other piece is this. I was in a meeting yesterday at the Department of Education, actually in Concord, and Kathy was there for a while because it's her division that is involved. And Nashua next year and the year after will be involved in working with the Department of Education, along with half a dozen or so other districts, on a process called focus monitoring, where we look at our special education population, looking at the type of disability, the type of programming, and try to determine ways that we can maximize learning and improve special education program within the school. So I think there are two pieces: the analysis of special ed programming within schools, the preparation of special ed students with high needs disabilities within the schools in the preparation, and then assist with that transition. Some of that transition is clearly our responsibility. Most of the transition is actually jointly with external organizations as well, and it's that transition, it's that collaboration that I think we have to work on. But the first piece, the piece of developing schools and students where everyone is valued, and we see a continuum of learners, not a dichotomy of special ed and non-special ed, goes a long way.
Okay, this question is on early education. In preschool, the ratio of adult to student is 1 to 8. 1 year later, it is in many cases 1 to 25. What impact do you feel this has on the ability to foster a rich learning environment? How do you feel about establishing standards for this, as well as standards for full day versus half day kindergarten? And in regards to standards, how can it be, how do you feel about setting standards in general? How do you feel about setting standards of excellence for early education? So really it's the transition from preschool with a ratio of 1 to 8 to 1 year later a ratio of 1 to 25, the effect that might have, and your feelings about establishing standards around this, around preschool, kindergarten, half day, full day, and so on. And I think, Mark, we started last with you, so I believe it's Bob.
Well, I'll try to get at those. I certainly believe that in the lower grades, we should have the lowest ratios that we possibly can have and can afford. And unfortunately, some of that becomes an affordability issue. In terms of establishing standards, I'm not sure if that means class size standards or academic standards. So I'm going to...
It's a mixture of both. But
Mixture of both. Well, I think we have to have standards at all levels. We have to have standards that are the same for all kids because we can certainly vary the time, but we have to hold the standard constant. In terms of half-day versus full-day kindergarten, I think the research shows in diverse cultures that the earlier we get young people and the longer we have them, the better off they are going to be for that. So in a city such as Nashua, I believe that full-day kindergarten would be important and would be very helpful to our students and to our staff later on.
Preschool education has been documented to be very effective. The research is very clear that youngsters who have an opportunity in preschool settings and exposed to opportunities and experiences really has a significant impact. And the research is longitudinal and it shows that youngsters who have that positive experience are not dropouts, stay in school, graduate, and move on. So we know that the preschool piece is very important. I do support the notion around standards for preschool kindergarten experiences. I think that because we because it's a very large school district with lots of different professionals all supporting youngsters, I think everyone needs to have a clear understanding of what it is that youngsters are, what the expectations that we have for youngsters, what kinds of skills, what kind of development do we expect of youngsters beginning at preschool level as they transition into kindergarten and then into first grade. Around class size, I would agree with Bob. It's important to where it is reasonable, where it is able to be supported via resources, that the class size be as small as possible. There's no doubt that the interaction between teacher and student is the most important thing that happens every single day in this school district. And so any way that we can support that and keep class sizes at a minimum, the children will only be the benefactors of that. I just want to make sure that I got all of it. The other piece around standards and common expectations is important for kids because, you know, there is a lot of moving from school to school and place to place. And so when one youngster is at the Amherst Street School and they move to Mount Pleasant or to Charlotte Ave, I think that if we have some level of standards, then the transitions for youngsters as they move about the city and as youngsters come into the city to receive their education, then I think everyone being on the same page will, again, help youngsters as they experience each of their grades.
The district actually does have a set of guidelines used for class sizes, and earlier this year, the principals of the schools had to sit down, principals of the elementary schools had to sit down and look at kindergarten through grade 5 and balance the class sizes across. We had to make some cuts from what we were hoping for in terms of budgeting. But the reality is we do try to maintain a ratio of around 70 to 18 to 1 in K to 2. It goes up slightly in 3 to 5 and then to middle school from there. And the reality is there's only a handful of classrooms that have a 25 to 1 ratio in the district, and those tend to happen in the 3, 4, 5 grade levels. So I would say it's not accurate to characterize it as many grade 1 classes or kindergarten classes that are at the 1 to 25 level, although I can't say unequivocally that they don't exist. I think the other issue is a very interesting one, is the relative benefit of half-day versus full-day kindergarten, and what it is we're trying to achieve with the kindergarten program. We know that full-day kindergarten is double the cost of half-day kindergarten, but we know that we don't get anywhere double the benefit from it. Here's Nashua as a district in a thumbshell. We have 1.5 times the state average low SES students, and we're growing at a rate that's 1.5 times the state average. We have 1.5 times the state average of students who score proficient with distinction. We have the largest AP program in New Hampshire and one of the highest achieving in all of New England. We're stretched to provide services at the top end and the bottom end. We have a teacher contract that's in the top quartile in terms of salary, and we have funding that is slightly below the state average. Now, do the math on those parameters. At this point in time, we know that funding is an issue. We have to make judicious decisions. Is full-day kindergarten better than half-day? Absolutely. Is it twice as good, and what's the relative benefit, and how do we best spend our money for the long-term benefit of our students? That's the charge of the district, the schools, and the board, and they take that task very seriously.
I'll answer this question a little bit indirectly. I think there's some value to having a dialogue about our kindergarten curriculum, and certainly ratios can be part of that. But coming from an early childhood background, I can tell you I think there's a rift between the early childhood community and the public school community, and I think the early childhood community focuses on developmentally appropriate curriculum, which in their mind has to be a comprehensive curriculum for that age group that looks at social and emotional needs along with academic needs. And I think many folks in that community feel that we're beginning to press kindergarten teachers to focus on academics to the extent where we're starting to sacrifice meeting the social and emotional needs of children in kindergarten. So I think there's maybe a broader discussion to have about what an appropriate curriculum looks like for that particular age group that looks not just at academic development, but social and emotional development, and how you support that in the classroom. And that might have as much an influence on why you have ratios beyond the fact they're licensing standards, why you have ratios that are different in the early childhood level than you have in the public school level.
Okay, I have here a whole sheaf of questions that we're not going to get to tonight. It's now almost 7:30. We've been going really for an hour and a half, and our candidates have been going for a while. So I really want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank you for these questions. These are exceptionally good questions, and I think they have, I hope they've given you a feel for these candidates, for these very excellent candidates. And I'd like to thank the candidates for coming, participating, especially this has been a long day, but it's been, I think, a very productive day. So if we could maybe give them a round of applause. So thank you. The candidates can maybe be around for a few minutes because there's some of these questions you may want to try and ask directly to them, but thank you once again.
Can you just add one thing? Just so everybody knows, so you can keep getting up, the interviews that we did Tuesday and Wednesday night will be aired on Channel 99 Friday or over the weekend. So that'll give you an opportunity. There were about 18 questions that we asked the candidate. 9 of them were in common, and then 9 were ones that the board members came up with for individual candidates. Thank you.